Hello everyone, it's May 22nd, 2018. It's Tuesday. It's Harp Tuesday. And in this episode, I thought I would answer a question that I read a little while ago, and that was, should I buy a spare set of strings? I think it's an interesting question, and there's no one right answer. It's going to vary depending on the person, and the circumstances, and the harp. And I just thought I would just give you some information if this is something you're thinking about, so that you maybe feel more like you can make a more informed decision. So I'm going to start by talking about how often strings break. And that's going to vary by a wide number of circumstances. So for example, the harp that you have, how often you play, how strongly you play, the climate that you're in, the climate that you keep your harp, how often you move your harp, the tension on your harp, right? There are lower and higher tension strung harps. Lower tension strung harps will have strings break less often. But what I'm going to talk about right now are the types of material on strings and how often they might break. So first of all, wire. These are not wire strung harps, the sort of medieval wire strung harps that are all wire, single filament, but the wire strings that are on the base of pedal harps and larger lever harps. And these wire strings, contrary to some videos you may have seen, they don't break that often. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised for you to go like decades without breaking a wire string. They do break on occasion, but not very often. Nylon, this harp's strung with nylon. It's also fairly low tension. I have gut on my pedal harp, but many people have nylon on the first octave or the first two octaves, and those of course will be higher tension. I would say they will break on the pedal harp. Not super often, but they will break. Whereas on this lower tension lever harp, very infrequently. Nylon, they're very, very durable. Gut is less durable. It will break more often. So again, on this first and second octave, I would say at least every 6 months, maybe at least every 3 months, I will have at least one string break. Third octave, not as frequently, and fourth and fifth octave, the large gut strings, as long as they're not a bad batch of strings, they should last for quite some time. And rather than break, rather than snap, they'll generally start to fray, and you can tell that they're going, so you could order a new replacement, rather than bang, having a break and beat without a replacement. Fluorocarbon strings, these are a more recent thing. This Camac Excalibur is strung with fluorocarbon, as is this little electric harp. Now, with the Excalibur, I found they're very similar to gut in that they do break quite a bit. The second octave, I have had a lot of breakages in the second octave. Third octave F is broken twice. So the experience there has been less durable than nylon. But I also think the stringing on this is a fairly thin gauge, so there's a fair amount of tension on the strings, even though it doesn't feel like that on the hand. This little electric harp is strung with fluorocarbon, but quite loosely strung. I don't know if you can see here, and I haven't had any strings break on that. So again, it's not just the material, but I guess don't assume that fluorocarbon is going to be some magical thing that's going to last amazingly well. They do break as well. So strings will break. Strings will break. But if wire and nylon, low tension harp, good climate, you could go years without anything breaking. Whereas a pedal harp, bad climate, gut strings, you're going to have breakages. How often should I replace strings? So this is another question that kind of ties in with that. You might say, okay, I'm going to replace these strings every year, so I might as well have a backup and I'll just use that when I replace strings. And again, you might read some websites, manufacturers, whatever, will tell you, replace your strings every year if you're a professional, or every 2 years if you're an amateur, or something similar to that. I don't think you need to do it that often. It's going to depend, again, on you and the circumstances. It can be expensive. So for a pedal harp, to replace all the strings, $500 plus US dollars, it's expensive. And are you seeing whatever gain in sound quality? Is it enough to make it worthwhile? Hard to know, right? Again, it's going to depend partly on the person and the circumstances. Yes, after a year, you probably will see some improvement if you replace your strings. After 2 years, yeah, at some point, yes, you're going to see a fairly large improvement. But I think there's nothing wrong with just replacing strings as they break, or when they are, again, they fray. If they're gut strings or they're really driving you crazy, you can tell that they're not in true pitch anymore. And just doing it that way. For me, what I always recommend is, if you're thinking of changing your strings, from my point of view, the biggest bang for your buck are the wire strings. Because even though they don't, it's kind of counterintuitive, they don't break that often, but they do, to my ear, lose a lot of zip. So I replace my wires every year, whereas the gut, not as often. And I think that's where, if you're like, well, harp doesn't sound so good, I want to do something, try replacing the wires to start with. So you don't necessarily need to replace your strings every 2 years. Do strings, unused strings, do they age? So for example, if you've got this replacement set and you're like, I'm going to put this on 5 years later, is it worth it? Have they aged even though they've not been used? Yes, they do age. I can't tell you exactly how much. And again, most of my experiences with gut, like a decade-old gut string, even though it's been stored perfectly and sealed and everything, it's not going to sound great. It'll work in a pinch, but it's not going to sound great. I wouldn't want to restring. It wouldn't be worthwhile restringing with I would say decade-old gut strings. 5 years old, maybe. 3, 4, 2. I don't know where the cutoff is. I don't know how they age. I don't know what the curve is or anything. And of course, you never know when you buy gut strings, how long are those straight from the manufacturer? Have they just been created? Have they maybe been sitting around for 6 months or a year or two or whatever? So they do age, and I can't tell you exactly how much. Something you can be aware of, what's worth being aware of, is you can, in a pinch, use similar strings. So if your A breaks and you don't have an A, but you got a G, you could put that G on. It would work. It's probably not going to be exactly the same gauge, and it's not ideal, but in a pinch, you could do that. So, for example, you could create a skeleton backup set as insurance, where you've got the C's and the F's, because they're color-coded, and then maybe the D's and the A's, so that you could, if an E breaks, you could put a D on. If a G or B breaks, you could put an A on. So you just have this kind of emergency backup. Now, is it worth the savings of how not having to buy 3 out of 7 strings per octave? Again, that depends on your circumstances. One of the best things you can do to kind of make your strings last as long as possible is maintaining a good environment. If you look at the video description down here, you'll see a great article by Dusty Strings about creating a good environment for your harp, what's healthy for your harp. And I think if it's healthy for your harp, it'll be healthy for your strings. So that's something just to be aware of. And that, again, the environment that you live in can play a big factor in how often you will break strings. If it gets, yeah. How annoying or critical would a broken string be? So that's also going to play into your decision. For me as a professional, I need a backup set of strings for my pedal harp. It's just no question. Is somebody first starting out? Would you need a backup? I don't know. How annoying, how critical would it be? How easy is it to get a replacement? So again, maybe there's a harp store in your neighborhood. Perfect. Or maybe your country doesn't sell harps. There's no harp strings available in your country, and it's super expensive and takes months to get them there. The easier it is to get a hold of one, maybe the less critical it is to have a backup. The harder it is, maybe you want to have that backup just in case, insurance, right? What does the cost mean to you? And again, there's a set cost for strings, but what does that mean for you? Bill Gates, hey, he might as well have a bunch of replacement harp strings. Whereas if buying a set of strings is the difference between eating that month, probably better to eat, right? So the cost of that backup set is going to be different in proportion for everyone. So for some real world examples, I started on this Aoyama. We never had a backup set of strings. As it turns out, they don't break very often, so it's great. My teacher had backups that we could buy if we needed, so it was possible to get a replacement. And obviously, it's annoying. It's annoying when, especially as I really got into it, started practicing. Any missed day, not being able to practice, was a real downer. But in the end, not having them worked out fine. I have a spare set, of course, for my pedal harp. I have a spare set for the Kamek because to get them, it's not super critical. It would be fine to go a couple weeks with a broken string if I had to, but it's not ideal, and there's not the easiest to get replacements. I have to order them from the States, and they have to get mailed here and arrive. So I have a spare set. I don't have a spare set for this little harp. Again, I don't actually play it that frequently, so if a string broke, I would order it in, but having to wait a couple weeks, it's going to be okay. And so, for example, if you are someone just starting to play the harp, maybe you don't even know, is this going to be something you're going to be really passionate about and spending tons of time on, or is it going to be more of an occasional thing? Again, you might have a string break, even if there's a harp store in town. You might have a string break on a Friday, a harp store's closed, maybe they close over the weekend, it's holiday Monday, you can't get in there on Tuesday because you're busy. It might be a week before you get a replacement for that string, and maybe it's a crucial string right in the middle of the harp. You can't practice the music that you're wanting to play, and you can't play, and that can be frustrating. Maybe you have several harps, and you just play on a different harp. It's going to vary with everyone, but hopefully this gives you some information to base the decision on. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope you found it useful. A shout out to my patrons for supporting Harp Tuesday. You can become my patron as well. And I will see you in 2 weeks' time. Cheers.